Minister, before I address further on higher education, I just want to say that I hope that the whole school transport debacle is solved for now. But I would also urge you to publish the review, or to get the review sorted out as soon as possible, so that we're not in the same situation with school transport next year. I want to acknowledge the advances that have been made in this budget to support students and to help them and their families through the crisis. And I want to thank Minister Harris and Minister Collins for at least listening to some of the recommendations we've made in this chamber and outside over the past year. The Minister also knows that there's a great uphill climb that we have to do to address the chronic underfunding of the third level sector. The 307 million gap, the precarious working conditions, the staff-student ratio, the student supports, particularly for part-time students, those studying in the north and those forced to study abroad, students with disabilities, and they're just some of the areas that need to be addressed in further and higher education. But most striking of the budget is that there's no specific provision for student accommodation. In the midst of the student accommodation crisis, for this to be excluded is very, very hard to believe. Advanced student accommodation projects are sitting on the shelf because the government will not support the colleges to deliver them. Now, in our own alternative budget, we allocated an additional 81 million to get the projects on site and under construction to deliver affordable college-owned accommodation and to take the pressure off the private rental market. And I would really ask the Minister to go back to DPERP, to go back to the Minister for Housing, and to make sure that there's funding put in place, because otherwise, in terms of student accommodation, we're going to end up in the very same situation next year and the year after and the year after, until we're in a situation where we have on-campus higher education institute owned accommodation for students. The other thing is that parents who are paying for rent for their students are excluded from the tax rebate introduced for others. Rent is rent. If parents have proof that they're renting accommodation for their students to attend college, then they need to be eligible for that fund. Again, I would ask the government to go back, to look at that. We can't just exclude students because we don't like the way that rent is being paid. There's proof of that rent being paid. It absolutely has to be changed, even at this stage. The SUSI supports and the cuts to fees to help the struggling students and families are welcome, and indeed they're very sorely needed. Sinn Féin wanted to see a 25% increase in the SUSI maintenance grant, and this was a recommendation from the independent SUSI review commissioned by government. They called for the 25% increase before this year's inflation and the cost of living. So reducing the fees by €1,000 is absolutely the right thing to do, but we need to abolish fees. I appreciate that the government have gone from a position of saying absolutely no, we're not going to touch fees, to a situation where we're abolishing them, at least on a temporary basis for this year. But that needs to be permanent. We cannot be an outlier. We cannot be one of the few countries that charge fees. I know there's 11 other states that don't charge student fees, and we need to do that as well. In the case as well where we desperately need apprentices, we should be abolishing the apprenticeship fees, and that needs to be done. How am I for time? Who else is going? Have I just got 1 minute to say?
Andrews is after you.
Right, okay. I've just 1 minute to say on the PhD researchers. I welcome the €500 for the PhD researchers, but it doesn't go nearly far enough. And again, less than half of all PhD researchers will be eligible for this. Because the PhD researchers don't have worker status, they're not eligible for the rent rebate also, and that is something the government needs to look at. We need to treat PhD researchers as workers. It's absolutely crazy what's got the exploitation that's going on for PhD researchers. They're so valuable to our economy, to our nation, everything else. The other thing is the membership of CERN. It's less than 1.5 million. And the Minister and the Government need to ensure that we have associate membership of CERN. It's vitally important to future research and development in this area. The benefits from it speak for themselves. There's a multiplier effect of at least 3 times and up to 20 times in terms of the investment there. It has to be done to address the problems that we have now in terms of climate change and many other issues and problems that are arising, and other ones that are going to face us as a country into the future. 1.5 million is such a small amount of money to get so much back from being a member of CERN. Thank you.